Let me take you back 3,300 years. You're in ancient Egypt on a flat mud roof because inside the house it's still holding the heat of the day like a brick oven that resents you personally. The sun goes down over the western cliffs, and I need you to understand what that actually means because you have never once experienced it. It gets dark, not dim and not cozy, completely dark. The kind of dark where you put your hand in front of your face and the hand isn't there. No streetlight, no glow on the horizon from the next town over. No phone face down on the table leaking blue light at the ceiling. Just a black sky absolutely detonating with stars. And somewhere down the river, in a temple compound you're not allowed to enter, a man is lying on his back on a stone roof watching one specific star with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. He is at work, he is being paid for this. And what he is doing that night will determine when the country plants its crops, when the king holds his festivals, and whether the sun comes up in the morning. That last part is not a joke to him. So what did Egyptians actually do at night? We're going to get into oil lamps and castor oil, hippos, professional star watchers, a party the state officially sanctioned that was explicitly about getting hammered, a serpent that had to be murdered every single evening, tomb robbers with a 9 to 5 in reverse, and a water clock from 1400 BCE that was engineered around a fact most people today get wrong about time. And by the end, you're going to know why the number of hours on your phone right now says 24 and not 20 or 30. Let's go. The civilization we only ever look at in daylight. Here's the thing nobody tells you about Egypt. Everything you have ever seen about this place is lit. Golden hour over the pyramids. Sun blazing off the limestone. The sun disk on every temple wall. Ra in his boat. Akhenaten's little hands of sunlight reaching down to pat his family on the head. Egypt is the sun civilization. That's the brand. That's the thumbnail. And it's not wrong. It's just the half we can photograph, because Egypt's actual obsession, the thing they built the machinery for, the thing they staffed with full-time professionals and wrote entire books about, was what happened after the sun left. Their most detailed religious text is a minute-by-minute account of the night. Their calendar was set by a star, not the sun. Their pyramids were aimed using stars. Their idea of what happens to you after you die is, structurally, a night shift. We ignore it for a boring reason. Daytime Egypt survives in photographs and museum lighting. Nighttime Egypt survives in ceiling paintings you have to lie on the floor to read, in coffin lids, in astronomical texts that took Egyptologists most of the 20th century to work out, and in soot. Yeah, soot. We'll come back to the soot. First, the concept of dark. Before any of this makes sense, you need to recalibrate what darkness was, because I think we've genuinely lost the ability to imagine it. Egypt had no candles. Not in the sense you're picturing, no beeswax taper, no wick standing up on its own. What they had was the wick lamp, which is about as simple as technology gets. A shallow pottery dish, or if you were doing well, a carved stone one. Some oil in it, usually castor oil, sometimes sesame or linseed, or rendered animal fat. A twist of old linen laid in the oil with one end hanging over the lip. Light it. That's it. That's the lamp. That is the peak of household lighting technology for most of human history in the richest kingdom on Earth. The light it gives off is roughly what you get from holding your phone flashlight in a glass of water. It illuminates the space directly around it, and it makes the shadows worse everywhere else. It flickers constantly, so nothing in the room holds still. And it smokes. Which brings us to the soot. Go into the unfinished tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Look up, and there are black smoke stains on the ceilings from the lamps of the men who cut those walls. 3,200 years old. Somebody's light source, still on the ceiling, in carbon. The Egyptians knew smoke was the problem, and they worked on it. Salt in the oil to cut the smoke has been suggested from later accounts, and whether or not that specific fix was standard, the effort was real because these people were doing precision work by this light. Hieroglyphs, painted eyelashes on a queen's portrait, in a sealed rock corridor, underground. And the single most beautiful object in this entire story is in Tutankhamun's tomb. It's a lamp carved from translucent calcite, and when it's unlit, it looks like a plain white cup, cold, blank, nothing. Light it, and a painted scene of the young king and his wife appears through the stone from the inside. An image that only exists when there's fire in the room. If you were going to design an object to explain how the Egyptians felt about night, you would design that, and then you'd feel pretty smug about it. Sunset. The working day in Egypt ran with the sun, because obviously it did. Farmers worked the fields, hauled water, moved earth. Nobody's out plowing at midnight. But the good stuff, the stuff we can actually reconstruct, comes from Deir el-Medina, and this is the most useful village in Egyptian history. It was the state settlement for the crews who cut and painted the royal tombs, and the reason it matters is that these workers were literate and they wrote down absolutely everything on flakes of limestone and pottery. Attendance records, sick days, the reasons for the sick days, some of which are genuinely none of our business. Legal disputes, loans, who was being annoying, and they logged the wicks. Wicks were issued as rations for lighting the tombs, counted out and recorded, and scholars have spent a lot of energy arguing over whether you can use the wick counts to reconstruct how many hours a crew actually worked underground. The debate hasn't fully settled, but the picture underneath it is not ambiguous. There are men in a rock corridor in the western desert, deep enough that day and night are theoretical, working by a burning shoelace in a saucer of oil, and someone at the front office is counting the shoelaces. During the work week, they didn't even walk home. They slept in stone huts up on the pass above the valley, and you can still visit them. Little dry stone rooms on a mountain col, where the crew that built the most famous tombs on Earth spent their nights on a hill in the dark, and then went home on their days off. The house after dark and the things that want to get in. Now the ordinary house. Small rooms, mud brick, a roof you actually live on because it's cooler, and when Egyptians went to sleep, a lot of them did not put their head on a pillow. They put their neck on a headrest, a curved wooden or ivory cradle on a stem, which every single person who sees one in a museum looks at and thinks, absolutely not. Look at what's carved on them. Bes and Taweret. Bes is a squat, bearded, grinning dwarf god with his tongue out, and Taweret is a pregnant hippopotamus standing upright. And neither of them is decoration. They're security. They're on headrests, on bed legs, on amulets, on the walls of bedrooms, because the night was understood to be populated. And here's the part where I want to defend the Egyptians against the accusation of superstition, because their fears were extremely well calibrated. What comes out at night in Egypt? Scorpions. Snakes, including cobras, and horned vipers, both of which specifically prefer to hunt in the cool hours, both of which are attracted to human houses because human houses have rodents, and both of which can kill a child before morning. There is an entire branch of Egyptian medical and magical literature devoted to snake and scorpion bites, and it is one of the most practical bodies of writing they produced because the problem was real, constant, and lethal. So the grinning dwarf god on the bed leg with his knife out is not a charming folk belief. He's on guard duty. Then there are the dreams, and this is my favorite document in Egyptian daily life. There's a papyrus, Chester Beatty No. 3, from Deir el-Medina, from around the 13th century BCE. And it's a dream manual, a long list of things you might see while asleep, each one marked good or bad, with the interpretation attached. Dreaming of a large cat? Good. That's a big harvest coming. Dreaming of your own face in a mirror? Bad. Dreaming of drinking warm beer? Bad news. And honestly, correct warm beer is a bad omen in any century. They also had spells for after a nightmare, involving reciting over bread and herbs, and there's something about that I find hard to shake. 3,300 years ago, a person woke up in the black middle of the night with their heart going and reached for a procedure. A thing to say. A thing to hold. Because the alternative was lying there. The river, which is where you absolutely do not go. Quick one, but it matters because the Nile is the highway and the highway closes. Hippos are nocturnal. They come out of the water at night to graze, they are territorial, they are about 3,000 pounds, they can outrun you on land over a short distance, and they kill people. Crocodiles are in the water. Neither of these is a metaphor. Egyptian art has hippo hunting scenes, and the god Set gets associated with the hippo as a chaos animal, and people sometimes read that as pure symbolism. It's not pure symbolism, it's a risk assessment with religious paperwork attached. Egypt at night is a country where the main road is closed by animals. Keep that in your head because it's part of why the night belonged to a specific set of people. The party the government approved. Right. Before this gets too grim, the Egyptians threw one of the great parties in recorded history, and it was official. The Festival of Drunkenness connected to Hathor and to Mut, and the origin story is that the goddess went on a rampage and had to be stopped by being tricked into drinking an enormous quantity of beer dyed red so she'd think it was blood. She drinks it, she passes out, humanity survives. That's the myth. The festival reenacts the solution. And here's why we know it wasn't a metaphor. At the temple precinct of Mut at Karnak, there's a structure built under Hatshepsut that Egyptologists refer to as the Porch of Drunkenness, and excavation work there by Betsy Bryan's team has turned up the physical setting for these celebrations. Participants drank to the point of collapse in a sacred space, and then, by the texts, were roused by drumming so that they could behold the goddess in that state. Ritual blackout, followed by scheduled percussion, followed by a religious experience. Whatever you were expecting from ancient Egypt, that's the beat. The night shift nobody talks about. Now the temples, and this is where the whole video turns. There was a class of priest whose job title translates roughly as hour watcher. Their work was the observation of the sky and the tracking of the hours of the night. They had instruments. The merket, a plumb line on a handle, and the bay, a slotted palm rib you sighted through, used as a pair to fix a star's position by lining up two people and one plumb line. Surviving examples come from the later periods, but the technique is old, and it works, and it is genuinely clever, and it's made of wood and string. What they were watching were the decans. Egyptians divided the sky into 36 star groups, each one rising about 10 days apart across the year, and they used the successive risings of these stars to divide the darkness into hours. 10 hours of full night marked by stars, plus the 2 twilights at either end. 10 plus 2, 12. Hold on to that number. We know they did this because they wrote the tables down where nobody was ever supposed to read them again. There are star clocks painted on the inside of coffin lids from the Middle Kingdom, grids of decans laid out diagonally, sealed into a box with a corpse. The dead man needed to know what time it was. Where he was going, the hours mattered. For cloudy nights and indoor work, they built a machine. The oldest known water clock in the world came out of Karnak and dates to the reign of Amenhotep III, around 1400 BCE. It's a stone basin with a small hole near the bottom, filled with water, and you read the time off the marks inside as the level drops. Here's the detail I love. The inside isn't marked with one scale. It's marked with 12, one for each month of the year. And the reason is that Egyptian hours were not a fixed length. If your hour is 1/12 of the actual darkness and the amount of darkness changes with the season, then a winter hour is longer than a summer hour. An hour in January is not the same size as an hour in July, so they built a clock with 12 different rulers inside it to compensate. In the 15th century BCE, with a hole and some water. That's not folk knowledge. That's engineering with a working theory behind it. And then there's the pyramid problem, which is the flex to end all flexes. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north to within a few arc minutes, which is a fraction of the width of your fingernail held at arm's length. There is no magnetic compass in Egypt, and magnetic north wouldn't be good enough anyway. In 2000, Kate Spence published an argument in Nature that the alignment was achieved by watching 2 circumpolar stars, Kochab and Mizar, and dropping a line when they were vertically aligned. Other reconstructions exist and the argument isn't closed. But every serious answer has the same shape. The most precise structure of the ancient world was aimed in the dark. 6 million tons of stone squared to the axis of the planet by people standing outside at night looking up. Which brings us to the part where the sun might not come back. So why were they like this? Why the full-time watchers, the coffin lid tables, the water clock with 12 rulers? Because here's the belief underneath all of it. And once you see it, Egypt stops making a certain kind of sense and starts making a much better kind. When the sun set, it did not go away. It went in. Nut, the sky, swallows the sun in the evening and gives birth to it at dawn, and in between it travels through the duat, the underworld, in a boat, in the dark, for 12 hours. And that journey is dangerous. The Egyptians wrote it up in detail. The text is called the Amduat, meaning roughly that which is in the underworld, and it shows up in full in the tomb of Thutmose III in the Valley of the Kings from the 15th century BCE. It is organized by hour, 12 chapters for 12 hours, each with its own region, its own inhabitants, its own hazards. It reads, and I mean this literally, like a route map with encounter notes. In the 7th hour, the boat is attacked. The attacker is Apep, an enormous serpent, and Apep is not evil in the tidy sense. Apep is the unmaking of things. He tries to stop the boat, and he has to be defeated, and if he isn't, the sun does not rise. Now, do you know what the response to that was? Paperwork and a ritual. There is an Egyptian text known as the Book of Overthrowing Apep, preserved in the Bremner Rind papyrus, and it's a liturgy. Priests made images of the serpent, and spat on them, trampled them, stabbed them, and burned them, on a schedule, as a service performed on behalf of the state, every day, forever, because the alternative was not worth finding out about. And in the 6th hour, in the deepest part of the night, at the lowest point of the whole journey, the sun god meets Osiris, the dead god. And in that meeting, the sun is regenerated, and the boat can continue, and morning becomes possible. Sit with the architecture of that idea for a second. The moment of renewal is not at dawn. Dawn is the receipt. The actual rebirth happens at the bottom of the night, in the dark, in the middle of the underworld, at the exact point where things look most finished. So the hour watcher on the roof is not an astronomer with a hobby. He is monitoring an operation in progress. The vigil texts from later temples have priests keeping watch over Osiris through the 12 hours, hour by hour, all night, and that is the correct frame for the whole system. They weren't sleeping through the night. They were standing guard over it. The other people who worked at night. One more thing before we zoom out, because there's always a group left out of the official version. If night belongs to gods, priests, and animals, it also belongs to whoever needs the state to not be looking. And we have their files. There's a set of documents from the reign of Rameses IX around the 11th century BCE, usually called the Tomb Robbery Papyri, and their court records, investigations, testimony, confessions, sometimes obtained in ways that are not going to make you feel good. Men breaking into royal tombs, tunneling through, stripping the gold, burning coffins to get the inlay out. Working, of course, at night. Some of them are from the same community that built the tombs. They knew the layouts because their fathers cut them. There's a whole economy in these papyri, receivers, bribed officials, split shares, and the picture that comes out of it is a second Egypt operating in the same darkness the priests were guarding, run by people who were mostly broke. The Star Watcher and the Tomb Robber were out on the same night, under the same sky, in the same silence. One got a title, the other got a trial, and both of them, in the end, only appear in the record because someone else wrote them down. So let's take a step back. We've gone from a wick in a saucer of oil to a serpent being stabbed on schedule. What does all of it add up to? First, Egyptian night was not off hours. It was staffed. There were people whose entire professional identity was the dark, and there was equipment, training, texts, rotas, and a state budget behind it. Second, their astronomy and their religion were the same activity. We keep trying to split those because we grew up with them split. They didn't. Watching Sirius rise before dawn was how you knew the flood was coming, which was how you knew whether the country would eat, and that made the star a god, and that made the watching a rite. Measurement and worship were one job. The star clock is in the coffin for a reason. Third, and this is the one I can't get over, we kept their night. The 24-hour day is Egyptian. 12 hours of darkness, out of 10 deacon stars plus 2 twilights, and 12 for the daylight to match it. The 60 minutes inside the hour came later from Mesopotamian math, but the 24 is theirs, and the 12 at the front of it is specifically a count of stars. The calendar too, more or less. They ran a 365-day year with no leap day, which meant it drifted against the actual solar year by a day every 4 years, which meant their festivals slowly walked around the seasons. And they knew. In 238 BCE, the Canopus decree under Ptolemy III proposed adding a day every 4th year to fix it, and it was essentially not adopted. The ritual calendar mattered more than the accurate one. Then Julius Caesar came to Egypt, took the Egyptian solar calendar, had a Greek astronomer in Alexandria bolt the leap day on, and shipped it to Rome. That's the Julian calendar, which becomes the Gregorian calendar, which is the one on your wall. So the calendar hanging in your kitchen is an Egyptian design with a Greek patch, distributed by a Roman. Fourth, and this is the quiet part, the people doing the most sophisticated observational work in the ancient world were doing it because they were afraid. Not curious. Afraid. The whole apparatus, the professional watchers, the 12-chapter map of the underworld, the nightly execution of a serpent, exists because a civilization looked at sunset and refused to file it as routine. They thought the sunrise had to be earned, every time, by somebody staying awake. The last bit, which is what gets me, honestly. They were wrong. That's the thing. Apep is not real. The boat is not real. The sun was going to come up over those cliffs whether the priest stayed on the roof or went to bed, and it did, every morning for 3,000 years of Egyptian history and about 4.5 billion years before that. But being wrong about the reason didn't make the watching worthless. Because in the course of guarding a sunrise that didn't need guarding, they divided the night into 12, built a clock that knew about seasons, aimed a mountain of stone at the pole, worked out that one star's return meant the river was coming, and handed the whole structure of the day forward to everybody who came after. Fear made them pay attention, and attention gave us the hours, and Sirius is still doing it. Same star, same rising, still coming up just ahead of the sun at the same point in the year, exactly the way it did for the man on the temple roof. It's the brightest star in your sky. It's not hard to find, and almost none of us have ever once gone looking for it because we don't need to. We know what time it is. We have a rectangle for that. Tonight, when the sun goes down and the light in your room comes from a switch on the wall, the number your phone shows you will be a number between 1 and 12, twice, and it will be that number because 36 groups of stars used to come up over the Nile 10 days apart, and somebody was counting. You are not the first person to check the time, you're just the first one who gets to do it without going outside and looking up. So, genuine question, could you handle a single night of it? No lamp, no switch, no glow, the river closed, the animals out, and 11 hours of dark to fill with nothing but whoever's next to you and whatever you can remember. Let me know in the comments. Until then, see you soon.